Good morning and thank you so much for being with us on UBC TV. It is the extra thank you. It is a very cold morning, but I thank you because yes, many of you are watching UBC TV. But before I go any further, I just received sad news coming in. And that is, I want to send my condolences to the family of the Nyonyi Kusambiza upon the loss of Uncle Andrew Bemba. Martin Chinobe has just sent me a message here telling me that yes, we've lost our uncle. I also send the same condolences to the entire family of Munyonyo Buziga because this is a well-known family in that area. There will be a vigil today at the Bembas, then a burial will also take place tomorrow at the same venue. May his soul rest in eternal peace, and may the good Lord strengthen the Nyonyi Kusambiza family, both here and those in the diaspora. Now, today we are going to be discussing the World Malaria Report 2024, knowing very well that malaria is still the #1 cause of death of Ugandans. Now, for those in the urban centers, you may think that malaria, how does one die of malaria? Share one time, remember when there was that campaign of DDT, if you remember, that was strongly opposed by Honorable Kenny Ruchamuzi. There are other people who are promoting indoor residual spray to curb mosquitoes. Now, someone asked me a question that, Robert, let's be very honest. Does malaria kill? How can you tell me by dying of malaria? But the truth and statistics show that, well, malaria is still the #1 cause of death of Ugandans. I'm not an expert in that field, but I have one at least in studios with whom we are going to be discussing this, and that is Dr. Charles Mugoya, who is the Regulatory Affairs Manager, Target Malaria Africa. Doctor, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much, moderator. I'm very happy to be here to discuss the World Health Organization malaria report for the year 2024.
Now, before we go any further, please give us a brief summary of this report for our viewer to understand its content. Then we shall have a proper dissection of the outcomes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Before I give a quick summary of the report, I just want to make an opening statement about malaria, because many people, as you have highlighted in your remarks, don't believe that malaria is a killer. And malaria is actually a very deadly disease. It is one of the oldest diseases that has ever been encountered on the face of the earth. It is a global threat. So while we are suffering from malaria in Africa, some other parts of the world, Asia, including South America, are also suffering heavily from malaria. Malaria is a treatable disease, and that's the funny part of it. It's treatable, and therefore no one should die of malaria. But people are still dying because they take it for granted. The other thing about malaria is that the intensity of attack to human life is so high that every minute a child dies from malaria.
Every minute?
Every minute. So we have been
globally.
We have been seated here for about 4 minutes, and 4 children have died in Africa. We are not talking about global, in Africa.
So a day we lose how many children in Africa?
Yes.
If you're just talking about each minute, an hour has 60 minutes.
You can
now a day we're talking about 24 hours.
Yes. We are losing so many children out there.
Oh God.
And Uganda, our country, recorded 12 million malaria cases in 2023, according to this report, and about 19,600 deaths. Then malaria is also the leading cause of death and sickness in Uganda, as you have highlighted. Many people do not actually believe
These statistics, when I was reading through the report,
Yes.
you may think it's not even real.
Yeah.
When you talk about the death that registered in 2023 as a result of malaria.
Yes.
When we talk about people dying.
Yes. The statistics, if you go to our national malaria control program, the statistics are there. And it is Uganda that gives WHO these statistics so that WHO can reference them and use them for making decisions and intervention measures that will guide in the control of the disease. Yeah.
So since 2000, we've had a number of malaria control efforts, and one would say they have yielded some success. So much as we have the other side, let's look at this success. What can we attribute it to?
So we have, I was going to come to a summary of these findings.
Oh, okay, please
Yes.
first.
So we have, since 2000, the picture is actually not as bad as we have witnessed, because we are making a lot of progress. And this report indicates that a lot of progress has been made. In fact, since 2000, we have cut the number of deaths by half, which means that the global community has wakened up finally, and we have cut deaths by at least half. And then the incidence has also reduced. Every 1,000 people at risk, about 79 of them have died of malaria.
Every 1,000?
Yeah, every 79, for every 1,000. So at least there has been a change, because it used to be much higher than that. And then we have also had countries that have been certified as malaria-free. Yes. We have had some countries like Cape Verde and Egypt. Just in the last year, they have been certified as malaria-free. And then, of course...
So, Doctor, what does that mean? They don't have the mosquitoes?
So that means that they have the mosquitoes, but they don't have malaria.
Because not every mosquito spreads malaria.
Because not every
but
mosquito.
But there's that particular
exactly.
mosquito, a female.
Not all the mosquitoes that you see hovering around us carry malaria.
Yes.
But those which have bitten people who have the disease are those ones which transmit malaria. Yes. So in that list of countries, there's also Turkey and Georgia in Eastern Europe. They have also registered with WHO to be certified as malaria-free. So maybe in 2025, we shall see these countries also being declared malaria-free. And we are looking forward to a day when more African countries will be declared malaria-free.
Maybe very important for our viewer also is when you talk of malaria, we are now discussing the 2024 World Malaria Report and the key findings. It's also important for them to understand what is malaria in simple terms, not the medical complications, and what causes malaria. I think this is something that is also very important for them to know.
I think so.
Much as we are going to be discussing the findings and all that. Yes, Doctor.
Thanks, moderator. You see, we take this disease for granted to the extent that sometimes we don't explain adequately what malaria is. So malaria is a disease which is spread by mosquitoes, biting an infected person and taking it to a person who is not infected. It is spread through the blood, because when a mosquito bites you, it is picking blood from your body. And it is taking blood for its own purpose, for its nutrition. But because it is taking blood from a person who has the parasite moves with the blood into the mosquito. And then it completes some part of the life cycle there. But because mosquitoes don't feed once, they feed several times, it will go and bite another person. But when it bites another person, the parasite which is in the mosquito, in the salivary glands of the mosquito, gets passed to another new person. And that's how the spread occurs. So when you get malaria, you will develop a lot of symptoms. You will lose appetite. You don't want to eat food. You develop high temperature. And you develop shivers. You feel very cold. And then the high temperature actually brings other symptoms like headache, and definitely you need medication to recover from that. But physiologically, this parasite resides in our blood cells, red blood cells. So it destroys the red blood cells, and you become anemic. And if it's not treated, that anemia actually can result into other complications and eventual death. In children, this parasite can cause a lot of injury to the brain, and many children who suffer from malaria die because of brain-related damage. And even those who recover will never be very normal children. They will be a bit retarded. So malaria has a lot of impact on human health.
Now, when we talk about malaria having these impacts, and just like you've rightly said, the statistics, there is a reduction to even one country in Africa, Egypt, being declared malaria-free. The question now here is, these efforts since 2000, because that's where we saw so much of malaria programs.
Yes.
Vehicles here were moving malaria control, this malaria, fight malaria. Yes. Till now, what would you attribute this success to?
Yeah, I think the success has been because of the different interventions that have been rolled out to fight malaria. These include things like use of indoor residue spraying. You remember the indoor residue spraying we're doing in northern Uganda and parts of eastern Uganda? This was to prevent the mosquitoes, to actually kill the mosquitoes that were coming into people's houses. So that program actually helped a lot to eliminate the biggest risk to malaria from some of the areas of Uganda which had a lot of mosquitoes. And then we have also been seeing government rolling out the insecticide treated bed nets.
Yes.
The government, through the Ministry of Health, have done a very good job in going from door to door, distributing nets. And that has also contributed to the success that we are seeing. But also, we have seen that there has been an enhanced treatment regime for malaria. The hospitals are stocked with drugs that have been used, especially the so-called artemisinin-based combination drugs, which use like the atenams to control malaria. So the drug regime has also helped a lot. And then, of course, children have been treated preventively, you know, so that they don't catch malaria. It is called seasonal malaria chemo prevention, and that has also worked in our favor. And then in some countries that have adopted the use of vaccine as part of the regular childhood immunization have also benefited because the children have been vaccinated. So we are seeing fewer and fewer children dying from malaria. So those interventions have really helped.
Well, we have some good news, despite the fact that we cannot be complacent about this report. There's so much that has to be done. But, Doctor, according to you, or from your analysis, what trend, when you look at this report, caught your attention more?
Yeah, I think what caught my attention was that while we were having a lot of hope in the treatment regime using drugs, we saw from the report that some of the drugs that are being used for the treatment of malaria, we are developing resistance to them, especially the artemisium-based drugs, and yet we're using this drug as the first line of treatment. So if we develop resistance, it means that the drug is not going to be effective, and we see a lot of danger in that, and that caught my eye because this has been the mainstay of controlling malaria. The second thing which caught my attention was the presence of a new mosquito species. It's called Anopheles stemphysi. This species is new. We have not been having it in our region. But it came from Asia, and it has invaded Africa, and the entire Horn of Africa has been affected by this new species. It is a species which enjoys staying in the urban areas, and therefore it's going to have a lot of impact because we have a lot of people in the urban areas of Africa. It has so far spread to Eritrea, it is in Djibouti, it is in Ethiopia, it is in Somalia, it is in Kenya, and it has also crossed to West Africa. It is now in Nigeria, it is in Ghana. So this represents a very, very big risk to our urban population. So those two are perhaps the trendiest things that shocked me in this report. But also the third issue which I felt was new in the report was that because in Africa we have been having a lot of population displacement through some strife like climate disasters or refugees through wars and so on. We are now seeing that a lot of displaced people are now the biggest carriers of malaria. So they bring it from the countries where they have come to countries where they are going to get livelihood, and then they become a biggest problem. So the statistics show that the displaced people from those disasters are now becoming a new source of danger to countries which have hosted them. Yeah.
Well, very unfortunate there when we host these brothers and sisters running away from natural calamities. Sometimes the power of the gun, when bullets are flying, of course they run for safe havens. Uganda being the leading refugee hosting country in Africa, and of course in the world we rank about third position. So that means that we have many of our brothers and sisters with a population of about 1.7 million in the various settlements we have. But also now we have what we call the urban refugees. These are people who rent where you're renting, have a shop as you have. They're doing business, they are normal. And that is okay with us because it's part of our policy. Now, Doctor, this also takes me to, when you read through this report, you find that 94% of the deaths are occurring in Africa of malaria. And also we see that much as there is success, Africa, we may seemingly be slow onto this. I want your comment on this.
Yes, I have a quick comment on that. 94% of the malaria deaths are occurring in Africa, which means that the rest of the world takes about 6%.
Yes, which is not sorry, I was going to use the word which is not fair, but no.
Yeah, so that's a big population. I mean, a big population of Africa dying from malaria, and the causes for that are many. But I think the main cause is the decreased funding by governments and donors. Over the years, in fact, over the last 6 years, we have seen a decrease in the funding, which is allocated for malaria interventions by governments and donors. And this is not only like in Uganda, but throughout Africa. And then we are seeing that many of the African countries have got fragile health systems. Fragile in the sense that the countries cannot prevent, they cannot detect, and cannot treat. Because those three are very important in the fight against malaria. You must be able to prevent in the first place. You must be able to detect through diagnosis. When someone comes to the hospital, you detect whether he has malaria or not. And if you are not able to, you may even just give aspirin and say go home. And then the person goes to die at home. And then finally, you must be able to treat with the right medicines. But then we also have weak surveillance systems. We need to step up our surveillance so that we have health workers going around to understand the intensity of malaria in the countryside. We have climate change. You have seen some areas have been having a lot of rain, and when you have a lot of rain, therefore you are creating conducive conditions for malaria. Then there's rising biological threats that I've talked about, like drug resistance. People are swallowing drugs, but the drugs are not helping them. Yes. So these are some of the things that, of course, make our country very vulnerable. And then I've talked about the influx of refugees and so on. And they also bring significant cases of malaria which is not treated in time. And lastly, we have communities in Africa. They are called indigenous communities. They are laid out there in the land, in the countryside. They are indigenous communities. They don't have enough health care. They live in remote areas, which is underserved by health care systems. So all these reasons have compounded, and they contribute to the 94% of deaths that we have in Africa.
Okay, now 94% of the death. We are looking at the World Malaria Report 2024. Now, if 94% of the death of malaria are in Africa, and the most affected countries, when I was looking through, we have Democratic Republic of Congo and Nigeria. Now, Doctor, this is still on the African continent.
Yes.
What are the specifics that pose them as the outstanding countries most affected by malaria?
Yeah, I think there are three issues about Democratic Republic of Congo and Nigeria, which are conspiring to really make these countries stand out. The first one is climate-induced disasters. These countries have suffered a lot of climate change, flooding, increased the temperature. So those conditions are very good for malaria, for mosquitoes to breed in and then spread malaria. And then, two, these countries have suffered from armed conflicts for a long time. In Nigeria, there's Boko Haram. It has displaced millions and millions of people. That rebellion in Nigeria. And then in Congo, you have also had a lot of civil strife and armed conflict that have really displaced so many people, making it impossible for government to actually bring health care services closer to the people. And then lastly, because of the civil strife and conflict, these countries are also undergoing a lot of economic hardships. And in times of economic hardships, you will find that the spread of malaria gains traction. So those three elements have made these countries actually very, very vulnerable. And they also have very large populations. So because of the large populations, they are not able to take care of their health systems. Yeah.
Well explained there, but I'll be going for a very short break now. And when I return, we'll still be dissecting more of the 2024 World Malaria Report. Keep it with us.
Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Uganda, are you ready to kick things up to the next level? The Uganda National Lottery brings you Sports Take 10. Predict the results of 10 football games and win big. With tickets at only 500 shillings, join the fun and make your predictions count with Sports Take 10. Sports Take 10, your ticket to football glory.
Uganda National Lottery. Dream, play, win.
Participants must be 18 years or older. Play responsibly. The Uganda National Lottery is operated by Ituba Uganda and regulated by the National Lotteries and Gaming Regulatory Board.
In a nation hungry for truth, a world where every story matters, there exists a beacon of trust and reliability. For decades, they've been our voice and our window to the world, holding the mirror of our history. With 4 TV stations and 11 radio channels spanning 27 languages, they stand as guardians of information, defenders of truth. With Mascari Heritage Advantage, they uphold every citizen's right to reliable and free information. Their archived stories shaped our past and illuminate our present. Yet now, as new challenges arise and the world evolves, their mission faces its greatest test yet. Be part of our journey and let's navigate the unknown, uncover the untold, and safeguard our future together. Tune into your public broadcaster, for it is the intersection of trust and truth. Because to UBC, your story, every story, and every voice matters. UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Juko.
Yo.
Wachiko. Check the shopping, man. What's your secret?
Uganda wange, haven't you heard of the parish development model PDM?
Yes, I did, but I thought it was just a talk.
No, Sebatia. It is real. I and a few friends together formed a circle, accessed money from the PDM, invested in a portrait project, and now things are moving.
Juko. I thought I was one of your friends.
You are.
But you left me behind.
I didn't leave you in poverty. What you do, just visit your LC2 chairperson and your parish chief and start the process of economic transformation. Just like that. The parish development model is an initiative from the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Local Government designed to transform all lives of Ugandans for the better. PDM, my parish, my development, my life.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Welcome back from that break, and thank you so much for being part of Good Morning Uganda Extra. In case you have just joined, Robert Chirabo Nyonyitono is my name. And every day, every weekday, we have the extra, except Friday, and we focus more on issues that concern you now. This morning, we are discussing the 2024 World Malaria Report, of which malaria still remains the #1 cause of death in Uganda. And when we look at the global statistics showing that 94% of death is in Africa. That's not very good news. And accepting the fact that most of our programs aimed at fighting diseases, any disease, but now we're talking of malaria, we have so much input of the donor community. One would like to call them development partners, but the truth be told is they're also having challenges. And you know this globally, you cannot leave your house on fire and go to save the neighbor's house. So some of this aid has also had issues. It's shrinking and shrinking. But coming back home, Doctor, when you look at Uganda's 12 million cases, according to this report, what do we take about these statistics as a country now?
Yeah, I think it is, it rings a bell. That statistics rings a bell. When you look at 12 million cases diagnosed with malaria in 1 year, it means that something is happening which should be stopped in its track. And we think that in order to address some of to reduce on the cases of malaria, the country needs to be encouraged to address the root causes of malaria. And this can be done through political commitment, through proactive support for the implementation of policies that have been developed. Because I know our National Malaria Control Program under the Ministry of Health is very, very active. But they will need more support in terms of political commitment so that they can do their work and bring services closer to the people. But also, it rings a bell in the sense that the country as a whole needs to prioritize primary health care as the foundation for equitable and efficient health system. I think sometimes we give a lot of priority to other sectors, but we neglect health. And so this must be brought into the center stage. But there is also a need to invest in data. There is a lot of studies that have been done, and they have generated enough data, especially data that helps us to make decisions. And this data is not well utilized. Because if it was well utilized, we would attack the pockets where we're having these epidemics and control the disease. And
so briefly, to act according to science.
Yes.
That's what one person told me.
Science
that we need to act according to science. When science says this should be given priority, we must go that area.
Exactly. But sometimes it is delayed, or it comes later. And then the gap created causes a lot of death, actually. Yeah, so those are some of the areas that we think we can invest in and get a relief from malaria as a country.
Now, the report mentions mosquitoes, it talks about conflict, and also talks about climate change globally. Now, Doctor, how best can we tackle these so that we can reduce more death and, of course, malaria itself? Because it's detrimental. No sick person can perform to their fullest.
Yeah, the global community is actually doing a lot behind the scenes to address malaria. For example, the UN Security Council has worked very hard to reduce the conflicts on the continent. And we have seen also regional blocs like the East African Community in East Africa, the ECOWAS in West Africa, SADC in Southern African region, and IGAD. They are all involved in diffusing conflicts. And that ensures that we have minimal refugees and IDPs, and that where they are, they have access. So that mitigates on the conflict issue. On climate change, the UN, through the United Environment Program, has brought programs, and they are discussing these issues in the context of climate change. So they are addressing some of the causes of climate change, and those discussions are bringing about some recommendations that countries need to adopt in the face of climate change to reduce on the malaria. Back to Africa, the African Union is also very invested in bringing about some policy changes that can assist countries to mitigate against malaria. I will mention one, the African Union Agency for Development called NEPAD is actually spearheading the use of science-driven innovations and trying to ensure that those are given attention at the global scale, so that at the African in the African countries, and they are utilized to provide solutions against malaria. So all those interventions globally at the African Union level and within the regional economic blocks, ECOWAS, IGAD, EAC, and so on, those they are all helping to bring solutions. Yeah.
Now, earlier you mentioned of something that there is a new species of Anopheles mosquito. Is it Anopheles stephans?
Stephasi.
Stephasi.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, you said this is in a number of countries. I didn't hear you mention Uganda. Maybe you are still blessed because it's in Kenya already. Now, does this pose any significant threat in the fight against malaria? And if so, to what extent, Doctor?
Yeah. The Anopheles stephasi is actually going to play a very, very deadly role in the malaria. It's going to make things worse because it is purely urban, and you know how many people live in our urban centers. And so it's going to add a lot of challenge to the disease control efforts in Africa. Now, this species, unlike the other species, it also has a very funny behavior. It tends to attack people mainly at dusk. And that means that it attacks people when they are most vulnerable. That means that even if you had bed nets, it will not help, because by the time you go to bed, it has stopped, it has already fed. So the habits it has of attacking people at dusk makes it very, very difficult to control, because it's like it will pick you when you are still walking around in the evening. So this is really one of the dangers that it presents. And then lastly, the treated nets have also been shown to be ineffective against this species. So it means that we need other tools for the vector control to come in, because the existing tools are not adjusted properly to serve us in controlling this species. So it's a very dangerous species. We must deal with it. It is urban. It is deadly, and we really need to come up with measures to control it. You mentioned Uganda. Uganda has not yet recorded stephasi, which is good, but I think we are on a ticking time bomb, because Kenya has been attacked already, and anytime it will move here. Yeah.
Well, the characters, like you mentioned, something feeding at dusk, then before people sleep. This is something, a very big problem. Now, all we've discussed, there is something that comes to my mind, is the funding issue. Because most of these programs are donor funded. Now, how are we going to move ahead? Because let's see a bit. Donor funding, when you look at affairs in the countries of where our development partners come, are not at their best. And believe you me, people viewing us, some of these funds that were coming in are reducing day by day, and yet we rely on them heavily, almost 90% for our health sector and programs such as malaria control efforts.
Yeah, funding is very critical, and as I mentioned in my remarks earlier on, we have had reduced funding. I can tell you that the current funding that we have been having in the last year was globally was about $4 billion US, and it may look a lot of money, but the target that the global community needed to get eradication of malaria measures moving was about $8.3 billion US. So by getting $4 billion, it means that we only got half. So funding still remains a very, very big issue for malaria. And then also a lot of effort that has been put into research and development needs money. In the last year, we used about $690 million US. But the needs for research need much more money to get solutions which are local solutions tailored to fix the problem. And that funding gap for research is so big that if it's not fixed in time, then we shall never have these new tools like vaccines, because a lot of this research funding goes into the development of vaccines. So it means that we will have very slow delivery of vaccines which are life-saving. And then lastly, there's hope that this year, and I mean next year, the Global Fund, which is actually the biggest funder, it funds TB, as you know, it funds AIDS, it funds malaria also. It's going to hold its 8th conference. So during that 8th conference, it's going to make new commitments. So we are very hopeful that one of the commitments will be to fill up the funding gap so that we may have enough funds for control as well as research and development.
Now, you've talked about vaccines, and I think these have been approved in 17 countries so far.
Yes.
I stand to be corrected.
Yes, 17
now,
countries.
17 countries. Doctor, tell us, have these been of any help? Have they impacted meaningfully in the fight against malaria?
First of all, I think for the benefit of our viewers, we just need to mention that having 17 countries getting on board to use vaccines has been a very big milestone for in the fight against malaria. And we have, I want to mention that we have countries like Ghana, Kenya, and Malawi that have adopted vaccines. We have Benin, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. We also have countries that have just enrolled, like Cote d'Ivoire, South Sudan, Mozambique, Central African Republic, Chad, Niger, and DR Congo, Sudan and Nigeria. But Uganda has not yet rolled out vaccines. We hope that in 2025, in fact, it's planned, I think the Ministry of Health has planned to start the rollout of vaccines in April 2025. So this will go a long way in saving children against malaria. But I can already say that in these countries, we have seen very drastic drop in the childhood mortality against malaria. So I think this is a big, it serves as a big promise that we are going to have a very big relief from children dying from malaria when this vaccine is completely rolled out in all these countries in Africa that are endemic.
Now, our viewer, you must know that when you're vaccinated, it doesn't prevent you from acquiring a disease. What it does is it boosts your immune system, that even when you get this disease, you will not deteriorate. It won't take you down 6 feet. Just like any vaccination, talk about measles, the common one. Well, children who are vaccinated will be playing around with the rash, with the red eyes, but those that were not vaccinated, it will be a very different story. Yeah. And previously, measles meant death. Now, if we have this vaccine in these 17 countries, like you said, Uganda, very soon, one important thing is most of the children who suffer so much malaria, and we just a very huge chunk of them dying due to malaria, will not die. Now, for Uganda's case, doctor, about a year, I hosted some lady from the Uganda Virus Institute, and she talked about genetic or gene technology. And she said, we are working on developing mosquitoes that either kill the ones that we have, or they're only male, or their population, something like that, so that we don't have the females that spread. Now, help me understand, how far have we moved, and what is your perception of this genetic modification fights against malaria?
Yes, the genetic modification approach is actually one of the possible potential, because it's not yet in use.
Yes.
It's not yet. But it is one of the potential technologies that will go a long way in bringing long-term benefit in the fight against malaria. Now, I need to underscore the fact that the goal of the genetic technologies basically is to produce a GMO mosquito, a genetically modified mosquito, which can pass its genetic modification to its offsprings, and those offsprings will be established, and they will continue to remain as modified offsprings in the population. And that can be done in a relatively short time to achieve a new population of mosquitoes that are genetically modified, and they have traits that either suppress the population to remain very low so that it doesn't blow up to cause numbers that can escalate the epidemics of malaria. In some cases, they are using what they call population replacement, where the population which spreads malaria is replaced by one which doesn't spread malaria. So it works on the parasite. So those two approaches in genetic modification are very promising, and if they are given a chance, they will go a long way in actually mitigating the fight against malaria. Yeah.
Well, so much can be spoken about malaria, and of course we have been looking at the global report, that is the World Malaria Report 2024. Some achievements, but the journey is still very, very long for us to take. And I've always asked myself, previously there is so much that community would do, families would do to prevent malaria. For example, much as those people are not that very educated, doctor, like this current generation, they would close their windows as early as 6, they would slash around, they would pour oil. There was some effort. Now, let's look at community involvement in this struggle, that seemingly, and at personal level, away from now government, the donor community, you researchers and all that, for omuntu wa bulijjo.
Omuntu wa wansi.
Wa bulijjo. Wa bulijjo.
Yeah, I think communities play a very important role in alongside the role being played by health workers, the role being played by scientists. First of all, if communities are involved It makes it easier to introduce a technology and to supervise the performance of that technology for the benefit of the people. So community involvement is very important. But also, when the community have bought into the importance, then it is effective, because then they will roll out the implementation much easier. And it becomes cheaper because the communities have a way of spreading the information to reach everybody. So that's how it becomes important. And then when the communities are involved, it is easier for government to align other interventions around the issue that they have started with. So for example, when we were doing indoor residual spraying, it was easier to, if we had vaccine, to use that chance to vaccinate the children also. It would have done a combined role. So when communities are involved, we get a lot of benefits. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Mugoya, I just want to thank you so much for your time. And of course, our viewer, thank you very much for being with us all the way from 6:30 till now with the extension of Good Morning Uganda Extra. Let's all join hands to fight malaria. Let's ensure there is early detection of malaria. Let's do measures that can prevent malaria. And when government comes up with initiatives aimed at reducing this burden, let's all be supportive. Have a lovely day. May the good Lord bless you. See you tomorrow. For God and my country.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.